So far, we've only created synchronous actions. What happens when we want to do async activities like make API calls to the server? Here's the plan for this module. We'll begin by discussing the merits of creating and using a mock API throughout development. And we'll quickly set up a mock API. Let's jump back in the code. It's time to set up our mock API. Before we start handling asynchronous calls with Redux, let's set up a local web API. To get started, we need to copy some files from the course exercise files for this module. Look in the Before folder for this module. Inside the Before folder, you should find a folder called Tools. I've copied the 3 files in that folder over into my application. Let's peek at what's inside. API Server will serve an API that we use in this course. The comments throughout. Also, check out the JSON server docs. Mockdata.js is a file that contains mock data because we provide the run. And you might wonder why we're making one of those rare shortcuts where we can omit the run. So by convention, this script will run before the start API screen. To start the mock API, let's add a script to package.json. Right above start API, we'll call it pre-start API. Because we have prefixed it with the word pre, it will run before the start API script. What we want to do is call create mockdb.js. So by convention, this script will run before the start API script because it has the same name, but it's prefixed. With the word pre. Let's now run the start API script and see if it works. Now in this case, you need to put the run keyword in. Because to run most commands with npm, you need to provide the run keyword after npm. npm start is one of those rare shortcuts where we can omit the run keyword. So we'll say npm run start API. We can see that the mockdb was generated. You can see this new db.json file right here. And it can check and authors by API. So we need to start this mock API every time that we start our app. To do that, let's rename the current start script to start dev. And above it, we'll create a new script called start. In here, I'm going to call run-p. This is a command that comes with npm run all, which is already installed since it's one of the packages listed in package.json. The run-p command allows us to provide and send their output to the command line. Let's come down here, hit Control-C, and say npm start to see if this works. We can now see that our application starts as it did before, but we can also see that JSON server is running on port 3001 and our mockdb was created. So if we go back to the browser, we should still be able to load up data on our API on 3001, and if we go to 3000, we should be able to load our application. Excellent. Now our mock API is all set up. To call the API, it's helpful to have some JavaScript functions that will call the API for us. Open up the course exercise files for this module and copy the API folder into your solution under the source directory. I've already copied this folder. Course API contains functions that will call get courses, save courses, and delete courses. Fetch is a promise-based API, HTTP verbs for each call. Fetch defaults to get, so I don't have to specify in HTTP's convention. Now let's scroll down to line 25 where we begin declaring our plugins, and I'm going to call that new plugin, which will be webpack.define plugin. And we pass the define plugin a setting for our environment variable. We're going to call process.env.api_url and set that to the results of json.stringify and put our base URL for our API in here. Be sure to put a comma after that declaration. With this setting, now anywhere that Webpack sees process.env.api_url in our code, it will replace it with our API URL. And note that we need to call json.stringify on our result since Webpack requires this format for values. One of Redux's most powerful features is the ability to configure middleware the moment that it reaches the reducer. If you've ever used popular libraries like Express, then you're already familiar with the idea of middleware. Middleware is a handy way to enhance Redux's behavior. Redux middleware can handle many cross-cutting concerns, including handling asynchronous API calls, logging, reporting crashes, and routing. Dispatched to enhance Redux's behavior. The good news is there are multiple libraries for handling async in Redux, so the creator of Redux. To dispatch and certainly contain more clearly. Instead, is a function that wraps an expression in order to delay its evaluation. So in this case, the delete author function is wrapping our dispatch function so that dispatch can run later. Depending on your programming background, returning functions from functions likely feels a little bit weird, but it's a common and powerful technique in functional. This enables us the rest of our apps if in Redux. It just makes handling async more elegant because you don't have to pass dispatch for us synchronous or in the previous module, we set up our first data flow via Redux. We created a simple course that consisted of nothing but a title. In this module, we'll begin by restructuring our work to better separate concerns. There are some problems with our current design. First, courses page should be a container component. It's connected to Redux and should ideally not have much JSX inside. It's also both currently displaying courses and adding courses. For clarity, let's handle editing and adding courses on a separate page. So we can create a separate page called Manage Courses to handle the management of courses. To begin, let's remove the state. And we'll remove the change handler and the handle submit function. Then down here within render, we no longer need the form tag or the header for add course. Or these inputs for submit or text. So we'll remove this closing form tag as well. Now we do need to add in a fragment to wrap our render. since otherwise we would have two top-level elements. We're going to solve these problems in a more elegant way on the Manage Course page, which we'll create a little bit later. By the end of this module, we'll have an app that allows us to view, create, and update courses, all using Redux. For now, though, we should still be able to run the app. If we come over here to Courses, we just see an empty header. List of courses to fetch a list of Alright, enough talk. Let's get thunky. Sorry, I couldn't resist. The first step to using thunks is to enhance our store configuration. So open configure-store.js, and we will add thunk as an argument to the apply middleware function call. Here, we could add as many pieces of middleware as we like. Now that we've updated the store to utilize thunk middleware, we're all set to create our first thunk. We just added Redux thunk to our store configuration, so it's now part of our Redux middleware. So we're ready to create our first thunk to handle making an asynchronous call. For our first thunk, let's load courses when the app initially loads. So open up courseactions.js. To get started, let's add a reference to the course API since we're going to call it in our thunk. I like to put my thunks at the bottom of the actions file. So let's create a new function called load courses, and be sure to export that function so that we can call it. So this will be our first thunk. Every thunk returns a function that accepts dispatch as an argument. And yes, I know it likely feels weird seeing a function that's returning a function. It's important that the function you return has this exact signature though, because the function that we declare here is utilized by the Redux thunk middleware. And remember, thunk middleware passes dispatch as an argument to our thunk. That's how this inner function is going to get dispatch as an argument. This is the core benefit of Redux thunk. We don't have to pass dispatch in ourselves, so this way our calling code looks the same for both synchronous and asynchronous calls. Now let's add code inside our thunk to load courses from the API. We are going to return course API.getCourses. And since it returns a promise, we will use .then to handle the response. The response is going to return a list of courses. When we receive that list of courses, what we'd like to do is dispatch an action. The action that we are going to dispatch is going to be load courses success, which we need to declare up above. We'll do that next, but we will pass it the courses that we receive. Since we're making a call to a promise, it's a good idea to declare a catch as well, so that we could, but I'm putting the, and as you can see, I'm calling the API functions that we set up earlier rather than making an API call directly here. Again, I prefer to keep API calls separate in order to keep my thunks simple and to centralize the way that I open up actiontypes.js and to centralize the way that I handle my API calls. Let's finish our work on this thunk. I haven't created the load courses success action yet, so let's do that next. First, let's open up actiontypes.js and add a new constant, which we will call load courses success. Then let's declare our action creator. We will say export function load courses success. Which will accept courses. Inside, it will return an action. That action will have a type equal to types.loadCourseSuccess and the payload for it will be courses. I'll hit save and prettier reformats for me. Note that I'm omitting the right-hand side here. I could say courses equals courses, but you could declare this action in line if you prefer. In other words, I could take this action and put it right down here, dispatch like this. If you prefer that approach, that's totally fine. I tend to prefer creating in line here though, so it's real for two reasons. First, we already have a function called load courses, which is our thunk. Second, this action doesn't fire until authors have been successfully returned by our API call. To help save us time in typing, I'm not going to create corresponding error actions for each to show you an approach for handling async. Now we need to handle the load courses success action that we just created. We'll handle that in our course reducer. So open up course reducer and we'll add another case statement. This time we'll be looking for load courses success. And we will return action.courses. Since whatever is returned from our API will simply replace what was in our state, all we have to do is return the courses here. Simple as it gets. Remember, whatever you return from your reducer becomes the new state. Now we have our action set up and a corresponding reducer that handles the load courses success action. But the question is, where and how do we fire this off on load? Let's set that up next. To fetch course data when our app loads, we have a couple of options. First, we could load course data the moment that our app starts up, but that could be wasteful if users never end up navigating to the courses. Load course efficient. Any act. So let's did mount function inside our component. We will call this .props.actions.loadCourses. Remember that this returns a promise, so we will call .catch to catch any errors that might occur. If an error does occur, then we will just alert it. We'll say, loading courses failed. And then, again, remember with promise in order to catch. Great, to see if the Webpack configuration. You already have your app running. running, be sure to hit Control-C via npm start so that our new Webpack config is applied. Our list of courses is now if we go over to the browser, there we go. We can see our list of courses is loading. Great. If I open up the DevTools and go to the To catch any errors, we will call this .props.actions loads, we have a couple of options. First, we could load course data the moment that our app starts up, but that could be wasteful if users never end up navigating to the courses page. Or instead, we could load course data when the course page mounts. So let's go with option 2, since that's more efficient. Down here in map dispatch to props, we're already injecting any actions from course actions into our component under a prop that's called actions. So let's call load courses when our component mounts. To do so, declare a component did mount function inside our component. It's a promise, so we will call .catch to catch any errors that might occur. If an error does occur, then we will just alert it. We'll say, loading courses failed, and then append the error to the end of the string. Again, and remember with promises, you declare .catch in order to catch errors. Great, and with that final configuration, we're all set to try loading our app since we changed Control-C to kill the app. Now, if we go over to, if you already have your app running, be sure sure to hit Control-C to kill the app, and then rerun it via npm start so that our new Webpack config is applied. Now, if we go over to the browser, there we go. With promises, you declare .catch in order to catch errors. That could be wasteful if first, we could load course data the moment that our app starts up, but that could be wasteful if users know. Or let's go with option dispatch to props. We're already injecting any actions from course actions into our component under a prop that's called actions. So let's call load courses when our component mounts. Is return the courses here. Simple. Actions from courses. And there's plays. Rerun it via npm start so that our new Webpack config is applied. Now, if we go over to end up navigating to the courses page. Or instead, we could load course data when the course page mounts. So let's go with option 2, since that's more efficient. Down here in map dispatch to props, we're already injecting any actions from course actions into our component under a prop that's called actions. So let's call load courses when our component mounts inside our component. We will call this .props.actions.loadCourses. Remember that this returns a promise occur. Then we will just alert it. We'll say, remember with promises, you declare So let's create a new ourselves, so this way our calling code looks the same for both synchronous and asynchronous calls. Now let's add code inside our thunk to load courses from the API. We are going to return course API.getCourses. What we're making a call to a promise, it's a good idea to declare a catch as well, so that we could catch any errors that occur. For now, I'm just going to throw the error, but I'm putting the catch here to remind you that it's a good idea to declare it. our apps instead into our component under a prop that's called actions. So let's call load courses when our component mounts. To do so, declare a component did mount function .action as a promise, so we